Are there advantages to aging? Yes, I am Debbi-Jo Horton, and welcome to Advantages to Aging. Join my guests and I as we discuss aging and what makes for a healthy lifestyle, which results in a quality life. Thank you for joining me today. Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Advantages to Aging. And today, our subject is a little different from what you expect from me, but something that definitely needs to be heard and definitely needs to be shared. Today, my guest is Samantha MacMillan, and this recording could get really raw, but please stay with us. It's only 15 to 20 minutes, and you're going to learn some information that I think is very valuable. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you so much for having me, Debbie. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome. So now I know the listeners are sitting here going like, oh my goodness, who is this person and what is it that she's going to share with us? So why don't you share your story about how you left your abuser?
Yeah, and honestly, this is something that I've tried more than once. So I just want to let your listeners know that, if it takes more than one time to leave, it's okay. You're not a failure. Just keep going and just keep trying, but definitely get away. My abusive ex-husband actually physically abused me about 3 times. Emotionally, he was abusive. Financially, he was abusive in a way I wasn't expecting. But the biggest thing is the first time he actually almost killed me, we were in this argument and he wanted to still go fishing after he basically told our son he wasn't allowed to go fishing, as it was supposed to be a family event, right? And so, of course, I was a little upset because I was planning to go fishing with my family and we didn't really discuss the discipline action ahead of time. Like, this was just something he decided, but he was still going to go fishing. And I was like, okay, well, if you go fishing, that's fine, I guess. Like, obviously, I apparently don't have a choice, but you're going to take the dog with you because I'm tired. I work many jobs and I really just want to be able to be with my kiddo without like dealing with a dog always being up on him. Like, that's just going to test my patience today. And so there's this really stupid process, to be honest with you, where I was like taking the dog out. He kept bringing it back in. I kept taking it out. And eventually I got kind of tired of it. And I thought, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to lock the door, mister. Like, you got a key. This will get the point across. And it was a really silly thing to do, but it was kind of me trying to stand up for myself and being like, no, this is my boundary. This is the one rule that I have. I would like you to accept that. So anyway, I get this pounding. Just a few minutes later, there's this pounding at the door, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? So I go to the back door where he's at. I open it, and the first thing he does is he puts his hands around my neck. And there were some moments there where I really could not even, I could feel my life slipping from me. And it's just the craziest feeling in the world. And my son actually saved my life that day. He came out, he saw what was going on, and he just was like there in shock. And my ex started actually, well, my husband at the time, but he started actually loosening his grip. And so I was able to actually coughed a lot, got him off me. Went out, I'm like, Kira, go, run. And that was basically the first thing out of my mouth. And that's the first time I could ever really fully listen to me, to be honest with you. So he started coming to the kitchen. He literally pulled out the knife drawer, dropped it onto the ground. I was scared to death, but I was dumb and wasn't actually leaving the house, which was really dumb of me. But I was just in shock. This was the first time he'd really been physically aggressive towards me. And he even threatened to leave. And honestly, looking back, I should have been like, yeah, fine, go. There's the door, bud. Bye. But I didn't. I was scared. I was like, what's going on? This is the man that actually literally saved my life years ago. And that's a whole other story, right? But the last time he actually almost killed me was actually on Thanksgiving Day. I was working a double shift. I was working as a certified nursing assistant at the time. And I was working on that day. And so we actually had Thanksgiving the night before. Well, when he came to pick me up, Actually, sorry. Before this, his brother actually called, and I was in the middle of giving a resident a shower. And so when I got that phone call, and it was over some flashlight battery or something like that, it was something really silly and really not something you normally call somebody at work about. So I was like, okay, I will. I'm like, I have no idea what happened to it. Go ahead and go look. I don't care. But I'm at work and I really can't have this type of call right now. And so I hung up on his brother, which I guess is what made him mad. And when he came to pick me up, I could tell he was just furious with me. And I'm just like, okay. Anyway, it was quite a drive. It was about a 45-minute drive on this day, and it was at night. And he actually threatened to pretty much kick me out of the car. I'm like, no, I put gas money into this car. I get my car's like down right now, but we're supposed to be a team. I'm not leaving this car and just leaving you with our child. Like, I'm not going to leave our child. And so he was furious, but he continued to drive on. And then I remember when he came up at the stoplight, before he actually came up on it, he said how he was going to be taking a care with him, how I was never going to see him again. So in this process, I thought, okay, well, this is my opportunity. So I started crawling back into the back seat of our car, of his car. And I was in the middle area, kind of right next to my son. My son was young enough to where I actually had him in a car seat at the time. And so I was trying to be ready to like leave with him because the way he was acting, I was just really afraid of what would happen if I didn't. And so what he had done was he started actually, he grabbed onto my ankle. And so I actually slipped my foot away, and my shoe luckily like went like right at the spot where I needed it to, so I could put it on to be ready to run. And he actually, so I bent over, put it back on, and as I came up, he started elbowing me in the face. And he did this repeatedly, like over 3 times. I knew from what he taught me, because he actually was the one that taught me that the right blow to the face can actually kill you. I just was thinking, oh my gosh, this man's actually going to kill me. Like, what am I going to do? And I tried to splash coffee on his face. It was very warm at this point. It wasn't even very like, yeah, it was very warm, and that just made him more angry. And he just ended up like continuing to do it. Essentially, I ended up biting him to try to get away. After that, I immediately tried to get my son out of the car, and then he was just right there. Like, there's no leaving. He ended up punching me. I ended up with a concussion that night, and I don't even remember all of the story at this point. I remember being hit, and I remember everything else that happened. Well, I luckily, because he took my phone before all this continued on, and so I had no way to call 911. And a bystander actually saw everything, and she called 911 for me, and I'm very grateful to that person. She literally saved my life. I ended up going to the ER that night. After I went to the hospital, they actually put me in handcuffs and told me that I was being charged with domestic violence. Later on, it all got sorted, but I suppose the biggest thing I can really tell people is when you're in a really bad situation, you really need to call the police and you really need to go to the hospital that same day. And I wish somebody would have told me that so that I could have left a lot sooner.
And that's the key piece, right? Leaving before you get to the point where you wonder whether or not you're going to survive this attack. So sorry that you went through that. And I know that there are so many things that are right in our system, but there are so many things that are wrong in our system that helps domestic violence survivors. What is
Mhm.
one thing that you really feel needs to change in that system?
Honestly, I think we need to stop telling domestic violence survivors that they need to co parent. I understand, co parenting is definitely something we should do as parents, right? Like when it's a normal situation. But in a situation like this, it literally just destroys families. It keeps domestic violence survivors to where they have to still be continuously abused even after the divorce. And that's what a lot of people actually don't realize. So, if we need to change anything in our society, we need to stop assuming that it's okay to co-parent with a person who's abused us because it's not.
Well, it definitely makes the wrong impression on our children, doesn't it?
It does.
That even though this person did a bad thing and may or may not be a bad person, that it's okay and it's normal. And it totally is not normal. So I would agree with you that that is definitely something that needs to change in our system. Is there one other thing that you think needs to change?
Honestly, I think our society needs to stop viewing domestic violence the way that they sometimes do. But that's more of an individual change that has to happen amongst all of us, to be honest with you. Um, it's not like it's going to be an overnight fix by any means, but just if I could just tell people to just keep an open mind because, when these people come into our lives, they're not right away abusive. Like they seem really sweet, they seem really kind, they're our best friend. And we actually don't even realize things are going on until it's way too late sometimes. But yeah, we definitely need to make sure that when we are in those situations, we absolutely have to report it.
Well, I know oftentimes there's a stigma around domestic violence survivors, and whether they voice it or not, many people say, well, I wonder if she or he did something to provoke it. And let me tell you, that is so far from the truth. One thing that I would see that needs to change in our society is the way that people view the survivor versus the abuser and making excuses for either one. And
Mhm.
oftentimes you go through a huge struggle, right? To leave your abuser, and then you're
Yeah.
criticized for waiting so long. So I know that I myself have also been in an abusive situation, and leaving can be very difficult. And sometimes it can be something that comes on so quickly. And even if
Mhm.
you, the first time anything happens, decide to make a change, it is very, very hard to make that change. Not just with where are you living? Are you working
Mhm.
with that person? All those things that
Right.
I have to suddenly think about. But whether you stay or whether you leave in that moment, there's so many things that you really need to deal with.
Debbi-Jo with Neora. You know what our brand partners love the most about their Neora business? They can do it from anywhere. Think about it. Haven't you always wanted to have your own schedule, be your own boss, maybe even have a global business and be able to run it from your favorite coffee shop or lounging by the pool or seaside, not having to go into the office? We make sure that all of our brand partners have all of the tools they need to run their business while fitting it into their busy lives. So if that's something that you've been curious about, what it might be like for you to be able to do life on your own terms, then I think we need to chat.
So, what is one piece of advice that you could give to those who are struggling to leave their abuser? Is there something, a tip that you can give them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm probably going to give a couple of them, to be honest with you, because I'm very passionate about this. And I've got to say, for starters, you need to work on your mindset. Mindset is huge, and you can absolutely change the situation. It may be harder, but you can do it. And you have the strength to do it. It's in there. You need to listen to your fight and flight responses because they're telling you that you're in danger and you need to stop questioning it and you need to just go. But most importantly, above all else, you need, and I cannot stress this enough because, like I said, I wish somebody would have told me this years ago. You need to go to the hospital the same night that you're physically attacked, and you need to call the police. Even if you end up arrested like I did, even if, something crazy like that happens, you can still fight the system a lot easier. And I got to tell you, I'm glad that I did it. It was a hard journey. And you know what? My name was cleared eventually. And I had to really fight back the legal way, of course. Like, I'm not saying I was, obviously, I'm not going to go doing stuff that I don't want to do, but I just mean like I got an attorney. I made sure to get money together to get that attorney. And don't use the actual court appointed attorneys because they're not going to do anything for you. They're overworked, they're underpaid. Work really hard the best you can. Live with somebody else if you have to. Go to a domestic violence shelter, save up money, and get a real attorney.
That is excellent advice. And there are so many domestic violence shelters in your area. So even if you are not in a situation where you have to make that decision immediately, having those resources stored in your phone or somewhere where you can access them for yourself or for someone you love is really important. And I happen to know that Samantha is in the process of starting a 501c3 that will be helping to provide resources to domestic violence survivors as well as provide the emotional support that you need. So whether you are a domestic violence survivor or you know someone who is, or perhaps you're not a survivor yet, don't give up hope. I hope there's one thing that you have taken away from this conversation with Samantha today that will give you that hope and give you the strength to either get out of a situation that you personally are in or help someone you know who is in a situation that puts their life at risk. So, listeners, make sure that you connect with us at the Facebook group, same name by this podcast, Advantages to Aging. We'd love to hear from you there. Until next time, this is DJ Horton, your host with Advantages to Aging.
Do you think one of the biggest advantages to aging is all the knowledge we gain along the way? Me too. What did you learn today? Share with me in my Facebook group with the same name as this podcast, Advantages to Aging. Now hit subscribe so you don't miss all the tips to come in future episodes.